You are being robbed right now. Not by a thief, not by a hacker, by your own government. And the worst part, it's completely legal. There is a silent mechanism that transfers your wealth into the state's coffers without you signing anything, without you noticing, and without anyone going to jail for it. It has a name, and once you understand how it works, you will never look at your money the same way again. Stay until the end, because in the last 2 minutes of this video, I will show you what people who truly understand this system do to protect themselves. And no, it's not cryptocurrency, it's not gold. It's something simpler than you can imagine. Let's start with a simple question. Have you ever wondered why, even though you work harder than your parents did, you seem to have less? Why the apartment your father bought with 10 years' salary now costs 40? Why you save, do everything right, and yet the feeling is that you're walking backward on a treadmill that keeps accelerating. It's not your imagination. There is a mathematical, deliberate, and documented reason for this to happen, and it has a technical name that economists use quietly among themselves: the inflation tax. Here is what nobody explains to you in school. When a government needs money, it has three options. The first is to collect taxes. Problem: people hate it. Politicians lose elections. The second is to borrow, sell bonds, go into debt. Problem: it creates a bill that someone will eventually have to pay. The third option is the favorite, the most discreet, the most used throughout human history. Print money. Create currency out of thin air. Press a key on a computer and add zeros to the central bank's balance sheet. It sounds too simple to be true, but that is exactly what happens. And when more money enters circulation without there being more production, more goods, more services to match that new money, prices rise. That is inflation. But here is the part that changes everything. When the government creates this new money, who receives it first? The government itself. And what happens to whoever receives that money before it spreads through the economy? They get to buy things at the old prices, before the prices go up. Do you know who foots the bill when prices rise? You. You who received your paycheck weeks later. You who have your savings stored in reals, in dollars, in any fiat currency. You who were not at the front of the line when the money was handed out. That is the inflation tax. It is a wealth transfer from your pocket to the state, without a decree, without approval, without debate in Parliament. And now I need to show you the scale of this, because when you see the numbers, you will understand why I used the word robbery. In 1971, something very important happened. US President Richard Nixon announced that the dollar would no longer be convertible into gold. Up until that moment, there was a break, there was a limit. The American government could not print more dollars than it had gold in reserve. When that break was removed, what happened? Between 1971 and today, the dollar has lost more than 98% of its purchasing power. 98%! That means $1,000 in 1971 has the purchasing power of approximately $20 today. But wait, this didn't happen all at once. It happened slowly, over decades, almost imperceptibly, year after year, bite by bite. And that is precisely why it works. If the government showed up tomorrow and said, "We are going to withdraw 8% from the balance of every bank account in the country," people would take to the streets. It would be a scandal. But if inflation runs at 8% per year, the financial result is identical, and almost nobody protests. Why? Because you still see the same number in your account. You still have the same reals, the same dollars, the same euros. The number hasn't changed, but what you can buy with that number, that has, silently. Economists call this monetary illusion.
And governments around the world are masters at using it to their advantage. Now I need to show you something that is going to make you angry. Pay attention to this mechanism. When a government wants to spend more than it collects, it issues debt securities. Banks buy those securities. The central bank, in turn, can buy those securities from the banks, creating new money to do so. This process has a nice name: open market operations. In practice, it works like this. The government spent more than it had, and the central bank created money to cover the difference. Who pays? Anyone who holds currency, anyone who has savings, anyone who worked, saved, planned. History records this repeatedly. Weimar Republic, Germany, 1923. Inflation in the trillions of percent. People carried money in wheelbarrows to buy bread. Zimbabwe, 2008. The government issued a $100 trillion banknote, a single note. It could barely buy anything. Venezuela, 2010s. Wages doubled every month. Prices tripled every week. Extreme cases? Yes, but the difference between those cases and what happens in so-called stable countries is not one of kind, it is one of speed. And here is the loop that ties everything together. Governments go into debt. They create currency to pay the debt. The currency loses value. The cost of living rises. People need more money to live. They ask for raises. Companies raise prices to cover the raises. The government collects more taxes in nominal terms because wages went up, but in real terms, everyone is in the same place or worse. And the cycle begins again. You are inside this cycle right now. The question is not whether you will be affected by the inflation tax. The question is how much you will lose before you understand the rules of the game. Now for the part I promised to show you at the beginning. What do people who truly understand this system do? First thing, they stop accumulating idle money. I'm not saying don't keep an emergency fund. I'm saying that holding wealth in the form of currency over long periods in an inflationary environment is a guaranteed loss. Money is a tool, not a store of value. Second thing, they think in real assets. Real estate, shares in companies that have the pricing power to pass inflation on to their products, commodities, anything that when the value of the currency falls, tends to adjust upward. Do you see what's happening here? Those who understand inflation don't lose wealth to it. Those who understand inflation use it. Because when prices rise, those who hold assets see their nominal value rise along with them. Those who hold only currency watch its purchasing power disappear. That is why the gap between rich and poor widens during periods of high inflation. It's not a coincidence. It's not luck. It's mechanics. Third thing, and this is the most important, real financial education. Not the kind that teaches you how to make a household budget. The kind that makes you understand the monetary system, how money is created, how central banks operate, what the incentives of governments are. Because as long as you don't understand how the game works, you play without knowing the rules. And when you don't know the rules, you always lose to those who do. Let me summarize what you just learned in 3 lines. 1. Inflation is not a natural phenomenon. It is a consequence of deliberate monetary choices. 2. The inflation tax is real, measurable, and disproportionately affects those who work and save in currency. 3. There are ways to protect yourself. They don't require a fortune. They require understanding. You made it this far because you felt that something was wrong. And it was. But now you have a map, not of how the world should be, of how it actually works. And that is the kind of knowledge they don't teach in school, don't broadcast on the news, and don't discuss during election campaigns. Because those who understand this start asking inconvenient questions, like, why does an inflation target exist? Who benefits from it? Why isn't it 0? Those answers have answers, and those answers change everything. You just took the first step.